Welcome back to Vocabulary Boost. I'm Leo.
And I'm Clara. We're thrilled you've joined us for episode 2 of our series on mastering 1,000 English words in just 30 days.
Last time we laid the groundwork by exploring the cognitive science behind vocabulary acquisition. Today we're diving into something I personally get really excited about, the technology and systems that can turbocharge your learning process.
Yes! Today's episode is all about powerful tech tools and systems for rapid learning. I know some people might feel a bit overwhelmed by technology, but I promise these tools are game changers.
Absolutely. And what's great is that you don't need to be tech savvy to use them. They're designed to make vocabulary learning more efficient and, dare I say, fun.
Oh, definitely. I remember when I first discovered some of these tools, it was like someone had handed me a superpower. Suddenly I was learning and retaining words at 3 times my previous rate.
So today we'll cover spaced repetition systems, digital flashcards, mobile apps, creating a personal learning system, AI-powered tools, and how to avoid getting overwhelmed by all these digital options.
I can't wait to get started. I actually reorganized my entire digital learning setup last weekend, and I'm seeing amazing results already.
Let's kick things off by talking about spaced repetition systems, or SRS, as they're often called in the language learning community.
SRS is absolutely revolutionary. As we mentioned in our first episode when discussing the forgetting curve, spaced repetition is the practice of reviewing information at gradually increasing intervals.
Right, but what makes SRS tools so powerful is that they handle all the scheduling for you. Instead of manually tracking when to review each word, the algorithm determines the optimal time for each review based on how well you remembered it previously.
Exactly. The basic principle is beautifully simple. If you recall a word easily, you'll see it again after a longer interval. If you struggle with it, the system will show it to you again sooner.
And this is incredibly efficient because you're spending more time on difficult words and less time reviewing words you already know well. Let's talk about some popular SRS tools. Anki is probably the most powerful and flexible option.
I absolutely love Anki, though I have to admit, when I first opened it, I thought, this looks like software from 2005? But don't let the basic interface fool you. It's incredibly powerful under the hood.
That's so true. It's not the prettiest app, but its algorithm is excellent. And it's completely free on desktop and Android, though iOS users do have to pay a one-time fee.
For those who prefer something more visually appealing, Memrise and Quizlet are great alternatives. They're a bit more user-friendly and have game-like elements that some learners find motivating.
I actually started with Quizlet and then graduated to Anki once I wanted more control. The important thing is finding a system that you'll actually stick with.
Absolutely. And setting up your first SRS deck is really straightforward. You can either create your own cards or download pre-made decks. For vocabulary learning, I recommend making your own, though.
I agree. Creating your own cards helps with that initial encoding process. And here's a pro tip. Customize your review intervals to match your learning style. If the default settings feel too easy or too challenging, don't be afraid to adjust them.
That's such good advice. I actually set my intervals a bit shorter than the default because I found I was forgetting words at the longer intervals. Everyone's memory works differently.
Now let's talk about creating effective digital flashcards. There's actually an art to making cards that maximize learning.
There really is, and digital flashcards have such an advantage over paper ones because you can include images, audio, and even video.
Multimedia elements are game changers for vocabulary retention. For example, including a picture that represents the word can create a strong visual association. Our brains are wired to remember images better than text.
I do this all the time. For concrete nouns, it's easy, just use a picture of the thing. But even for abstract concepts, finding a symbolic image can be really powerful. When I was learning the word perseverance, I used a picture of a marathon runner crossing the finish line looking exhausted but triumphant.
That's brilliant. Another powerful technique is using closed deletions, which are basically fill-in-the-blank exercises. Instead of having a traditional front and back card with word and definition, you include a sentence with the target word blanked out.
Oh yes, something like, the detective made a blank entrance, carefully avoiding the security cameras for the word surreptitious. This forces you to recall the word in context, which better mimics real-world usage.
Exactly. And speaking of context, including multiple example sentences on your cards can help you understand the nuances of how a word is actually used in different situations.
Another time-saving tip is batch creation. Instead of making cards one by one as you encounter words, set aside specific times to create multiple cards at once. I usually do this on Sunday afternoons and create all my cards for the upcoming week.
That's a great system. And don't forget to include pronunciation audio if you're not 100% confident about how a word sounds. Most apps let you record your own audio or use text-to-speech features.
Yes, I once embarrassed myself at a dinner party by mispronouncing paradigm as paradigm because I'd only read it in books and never heard it spoken. Don't be like me, friends.
We've all been there. I once pronounced epitome as epiitome in a college presentation. The professor was very kind about correcting me, but I still remember the feeling.
See, this is why audio on flashcards is so important. Save yourselves from our embarrassment.
Let's move on to mobile apps for on-the-go learning. This is where vocabulary acquisition really fits into our busy modern lives.
Absolutely. The beauty of mobile apps is that they turn those small pockets of time throughout your day into productive learning opportunities.
Exactly. Those 5 minutes waiting for coffee, 10 minutes on the bus, or even that time you spend scrolling social media before bed could all be redirected to vocabulary learning.
There are so many great apps out there. Beyond the SRS tools we already mentioned, there are specialized vocabulary apps like vocabulary.com, which has a fantastic adaptive learning approach.
I'm also a big fan of Closemaster, which presents vocabulary in context through gamified fill-in-the-blank exercises. It makes learning oddly addictive.
Oh, I haven't tried that one. I'll have to check it out. I've been using Drops lately, which uses visuals and swipe actions to make learning more tactile and engaging.
The key to making mobile learning effective is integrating it into your daily routine. I personally have a rule that I do at least one vocabulary review session before I allow myself to check social media in the morning.
That's such a good habit. I've set a daily reminder that pops up during my commute time. After a few weeks, it just became part of my routine, coffee in one hand, phone with vocabulary app in the other.
Many of these apps also include gamification elements that can boost motivation. Points, streaks, badges, they tap into the same psychological rewards that make games compelling.
I'm embarrassingly motivated by maintaining my streak. I'm currently on day 137 in Duolingo, and you better believe I'm not breaking that chain.
Hey, whatever keeps you consistent. One practical tip for mobile learning is to make sure you synchronize your progress across devices. There's nothing more frustrating than studying on your phone and then finding that progress hasn't transferred to your computer.
Oh, that's happened to me. I spent an hour adding new words on my laptop and then later tried to review them on my phone during a commute, but they weren't there. So frustrating.
Now let's talk about creating a personal learning system that brings together multiple tools into a cohesive workflow.
This is so important. Having a bunch of great tools doesn't help much if you don't have a system for using them effectively together.
Exactly. Think of it like having a kitchen full of fancy appliances but no recipe to follow. You need to know how everything works together.
For me, my system starts with capturing new words. I use the dictionary app on my phone to look up words I encounter, and if I want to learn them, I save them to a special collection.
Then what do you do with that collection?
Once a week, I transfer those saved words to my Anki deck, adding example sentences and images. Then Anki handles the review scheduling, and I just make sure to complete my daily reviews.
That's a nice streamlined approach. My system is similar, but I also use Notion to organize my vocabulary by themes or topics, which helps me see connections between words.
Ooh, that's smart. Do you find that the extra step of organization helps with retention?
Definitely. It creates those semantic networks we talked about in the last episode. Plus, when I'm writing or speaking about a particular topic, I can quickly reference all the relevant vocabulary I've learned.
Managing review sessions efficiently is another important aspect of a good system. I've found that shorter, more frequent sessions work better than marathon reviews.
I agree completely. I aim for 3 10-minute reviews spread throughout the day rather than one 30-minute session. It's not just more manageable, but it also takes advantage of the spacing effect.
And what about tracking progress? Do you measure your vocabulary growth somehow?
I do. I have a simple spreadsheet where I track 3 metrics: total words added, retention rate on reviews, and how many words I've successfully used in conversation or writing.
I love that you track actual usage. That's the real test of whether you've truly learned a word.
Absolutely. And it's important to regularly adjust your system based on performance data. If you notice you're consistently forgetting certain types of words, maybe you need to change how you're learning them.
Yes, learning is iterative. You're constantly refining your approach based on what's working and what isn't. That's the beauty of having your own system.
Let's talk about how AI-powered tools are revolutionizing vocabulary acquisition.
This is such an exciting area. AI tools have advanced tremendously in just the past couple of years.
They really have. One of my favorite applications is using AI to generate example sentences that show a word in context.
That's so helpful because coming up with good example sentences can be time-consuming. With AI tools, you can instantly get multiple examples that show different uses of the word.
Exactly. Tools like ChatGPT can generate sentences that match your proficiency level too. You can ask for simple examples if you're a beginner or more complex, nuanced usage if you're advanced.
There are also some great browser extensions that support vocabulary learning while you're reading online. Extensions like Toucan or Language Reactor replace some words on web pages with their equivalents in the language you're learning.
And for pronunciation practice, text-to-speech technology has gotten remarkably good. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was even 5 years ago.
Absolutely. I use text to speech all the time to check my pronunciation. And some apps even use speech recognition to give you feedback on your pronunciation, which is amazing technology.
Another exciting development is adaptive learning algorithms that automatically adjust to your performance. They'll give you more practice with words you find difficult and less with ones you know well.
It's like having a personal tutor that knows exactly what you need to work on. I've been using an app that does this, and it feels like it can read my mind sometimes. It always seems to quiz me on exactly the words I'm about to forget.
That's the power of good algorithms. They can analyze patterns in your learning that you might not even be aware of yourself.
It's incredible how technology has transformed what's possible in language learning. These tools can save so much time and make the process much more efficient.
Definitely. Though with all these amazing tools available, it's easy to fall into the trap of digital overwhelm, which brings us to our next segment.
Yes. Let's talk about overcoming digital overwhelm because with so many amazing apps and tools out there, it's easy to get distracted or try to use too many at once.
This is such an important topic. I see many enthusiastic learners download 10 different vocabulary apps, create accounts on multiple platforms, and then get so overwhelmed that they don't use any of them effectively.
I've definitely been guilty of this. I once had 5 different vocabulary apps on my phone, all with partially completed lessons. It was actually counterproductive.
App hopping is real. You get excited about a new tool, use it for a few days, then see something else shiny and move on before giving the first one a real chance.
Exactly. So, what's your advice for avoiding this trap?
I recommend focusing on core tools rather than trying everything. Pick one main spaced repetition system, one dictionary app, and maybe one supplementary tool for specific needs like pronunciation or grammar.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about depth rather than breadth. Really learning to use a few tools well instead of dabbling in many.
Another important strategy is creating digital boundaries for focused learning sessions. Turn off notifications, close unnecessary tabs or apps, and maybe even put your phone in airplane mode if you're learning on a computer.
Those distractions really add up. I recently started using the Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes of focused learning, followed by a 5-minute break. It's amazing how much more I accomplish when I'm not constantly being interrupted by notifications.
That's a great approach. And don't forget the value of balancing digital and analog learning methods. Sometimes the best thing is to step away from screens altogether.
Yes, I still keep a physical vocabulary notebook where I write down new words by hand. There's research suggesting that the physical act of writing helps with memory formation.
I do something similar, and I also find it helpful to vocalize words aloud, which is another non-digital strategy that really helps with retention.
Absolutely. Technology is an amazing tool where it should enhance our learning, not replace the fundamentals. The best approach is usually a blend of digital efficiency and traditional techniques.
Well said. It's about finding that sweet spot where technology serves your learning goals without becoming a distraction or an end in itself. We've covered so much ground today. Let's take a moment to recap the key points from this episode on tech tools and systems for rapid vocabulary learning.
We started by exploring spaced repetition systems like Anki, Memrise, and Quizlet, which automate the scheduling of reviews to optimize memory retention.
Then we discussed how to create effective digital flashcards using multimedia elements, closed deletions, and batch creation techniques to save time.
We also looked at mobile apps for on-the-go learning and how they integrate vocabulary practice into your daily routine through micro-learning sessions.
We talked about creating a personal learning system that combines multiple tools into a cohesive workflow and how to track metrics that actually matter for vocabulary acquisition.
We explored how AI-powered tools can generate example sentences, provide pronunciation guidance, and offer adaptive learning experiences.
And finally, we discussed strategies for overcoming digital overwhelm by focusing on core tools, creating boundaries for focused learning, and balancing digital with analog methods.
I hope listeners are feeling inspired to try some of these tools and systems. Remember, you don't need to implement everything at once. Start with 1 or 2 new approaches and build from there.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for your learning style, schedule, and goals. The best system is the one you'll actually use consistently.
Coming up in our next episode, we'll be diving into contextual learning strategies for natural retention. We'll explore how learning words in context leads to better retention and more natural usage.
We'll cover reading strategies that boost vocabulary, contextual immersion techniques, sentence mining, and how to move words from passive recognition to active usage.
We'll also look at how to build vocabulary through media consumption like movies, TV shows, and podcasts, plus some fascinating story-based methods for word retention.
It's going to be a fantastic episode that complements the tech tools we've discussed today. After all, technology is most effective when combined with solid learning strategies.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of Vocabulary Boost. If you found this information helpful, please share it with friends who might also benefit from expanding their vocabulary.
And we'd love to hear which tech tools you're using in your vocabulary journey. Until next time, happy word learning.